The words hung in the air like mistletoe, heavy and suffocating, laced with the cloying scent of cinnamon and passive aggression. My mother smiled, a tight, practiced thing that didn't reach her eyes, as she looked across the table at Sarah, then at me. The Christmas lights twinkled, reflecting off the polished mahogany, off the nervous sweat gathering on my upper lip. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the world in quiet peace. Inside, a storm was brewing, or perhaps had already broken, just for me. "At least your sister found a husband," she said, her voice light, conversational, utterly devastating. The sound of forks scraping plates, the murmur of distant conversations, the crackle of the fireplace, it all faded. The world narrowed to her face, expectant, and the sudden, sharp pain in my chest. My sister, Sarah, kind and oblivious, flushed slightly, lowering her gaze to her plate. Her husband, Mark, shifted uncomfortably beside her. 30 pairs of eyes, it felt like, were suddenly, subtly on me. The air felt thin, impossible to breathe. It wasn't just a comment, it was a verdict. A dismissal of everything everything I had achieved, reduced to a single, glaring deficiency in her eyes. The roast beef on my plate turned to ash. My carefully constructed composure threatened to shatter, like a dropped ornament. The comment hangs there, suspended in the silence, a tiny, barbed grenade thrown across the festive table. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. My normal life before that specific Christmas felt full. Busy, certainly. Demanding, but full. I built things. Not houses or furniture, but systems, companies, futures. I poured my energy, my time, my very being into my work. My days blurred into a rhythm of early mornings fueled by bad coffee, late nights hunched over glowing screens, the exhilarating terror of making impossible decisions, the quiet thrill of watching something I helped create take shape, gain momentum. It was a relentless, consuming passion. It felt like purpose. For years, this was enough. More than enough. It was an identity, a shield, a source of pride. I didn't need external validation because the work itself validated me daily. The market validated me. The people who trusted me validated me. I was on a path, a trajectory aimed high, and the view was exhilarating, even if sometimes terrifying. But then came the family gatherings. These rituals of forced togetherness, steeped in tradition and unspoken expectations. My family, wonderful in so many ways, also lived by a different clock, measured success by different milestones. The question started subtly in my late 20s. Are you seeing anyone? Anyone special? They escalated over time. Pitying looks replaced casual curiosity. The focus shifted from my demanding job, which they vaguely understood involved computers and large sums of money, but didn't quite grasp, to my relationship status, or lack thereof. My sister, Sarah, followed a different path. She met a lovely man, got married in a beautiful ceremony, bought a house, settled into a comfortable, conventional life. And my mother, bless her heart, saw this as the ultimate achievement. Sarah was happy, loved, secured. In my mother's eyes, this was the finish line. And I was still running perpetually in the race, but for what, exactly? A phantom prize. The comparisons began subtly. Sarah's so happy. She found such a good man then, less subtly. It must be lonely, living alone, and finally, that Christmas, the full, unvarnished comparison, delivered like a benediction over the gravy boat. At least your sister found a husband. The quiet dignity I usually summoned failed me. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. My mouth was dry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk out. I wanted to point to my briefcase, always overflowing with work, and yell, This is what I found. Purpose. Ambition. The terrifying, magnificent burden of building something from nothing. But the words stuck. The decades of ingrained politeness, the desperate need to keep the peace, the fear of causing a scene, they clamped down on my throat. I managed a small, tight smile. Sarah's very lucky, I said, my voice barely a whisper, focusing on my sister, not my mother. Mark's wonderful, I tried to deflect, to diffuse. It felt like swallowing glass. That night, the drive home was a blur of unshed tears and simmering resentment. The festive music on the radio felt like a cruel joke. Every mile felt like putting distance between me and a place that should feel like home, but increasingly felt like a tribunal. The comment echoed in my head, amplified, distorted. At least your sister found a husband. It wasn't just about marriage. It was about value. It was about whether my life, as I was living it, measured up. And in my mother's eyes, it clearly didn't. Not completely. Not in the way that mattered most to her. The early struggles were internal. The fight against the creeping doubt. Was she right? Was I missing something fundamental? Was all this work, all this ambition, a poor substitute for a shared life, a partner? The sting of her words lingered, a persistent ache. I replayed the moment endlessly. Could I have said something different? Should I have shut it down? But how do you confront a comment delivered with a smile, cloaked in apparent concern? It's the insidious nature of it. It denies you the right to be truly angry. It forces you into a corner where defending yourself feels like overreacting to something meant well. I tried to bury myself deeper in work. Longer hours, bigger challenges. But the joy felt muted. The achievements, once a source of pure elation, now felt a little hollow, overshadowed by that single, casual sentence. It was as if she had placed a filter over my world, tinting everything with inadequacy. Then came the pressure to do something about it. Family friends offering to set me up. Well-meaning aunts hinting about my biological clock. My mother's phone calls, less about my well-being, more about her friend's daughter who just got engaged, or a cousin's baby shower. Every conversation circled back to the central theme, my unmarried status. It was a constant low-grade hum of disapproval, a steady drip of judgment that wore down my defenses. Work became my sanctuary, but even that wasn't entirely safe. The stress of building a company is immense. Long periods of grinding effort punctuated by moments of sheer panic. Financial worries, market volatility, competition, the constant pressure to innovate and execute flawlessly. It demanded everything. And juggling that with the emotional drain of feeling like a disappointment to your own family, it was exhausting. I started questioning everything. My choices, my priorities, my very identity. Was I fundamentally unlovable? Was my ambition a barrier? Did I project an aura of unavailability? These thoughts, born from the seeds of my mother's comment, began to take root, wrapping around my confidence like vines. The rising challenges weren't just external, the pressures of work, the family's expectations, but internal. The battle against self-doubt, the fight to hold onto my own definition of a successful, meaningful life. Then he entered the picture. Not as a solution to my family's problem, but as a fellow traveler on the same path. We met through work, kindred spirits in the entrepreneurial wilderness. We spoke the same language of vision, risk, and relentless effort. There was an immediate understanding, a shared passion that transcended dating norms. We built something together, professionally at first, then personally. His name is Alex. He saw my drive, not as a flaw, but as a strength. He admired my resilience. He understood the sacrifices, the long hours, because he lived them too. He didn't try to change me or fit me into a mold. He saw me. This was the shift. A major realization began to dawn. My mother's yardstick wasn't the only one. It wasn't even my yardstick. But the family pressure didn't abate. Even as my relationship with Alex deepened, became serious, became a fundamental part of my life, I hesitated to introduce him to the full family tableau. I dreaded the scrutiny, the inevitable questions about marriage, about his intentions, about our timeline. It felt like exposing something precious to a potentially critical gaze. Alex, patient and understanding, saw the toll it took. He saw the way my mother's words chipped away at me, even when I tried to pretend they didn't. He knew about the "at least your sister" comment. He knew the context. He saw the pressure cooker I stepped into every time a family gathering loomed. The midpoint shift wasn't one dramatic event, but a gradual dawning. It was in the quiet moments with Alex, sharing dreams and fears, building a life together that felt authentic and right for us. It was realizing that their judgment was about their own fears and expectations, not about my worth. It was understanding that I didn't need their approval to be happy, or successful, or loved. The shift was internal. I decided to stop playing defense. I decided to stop letting their narrative define my reality. The betrayer wasn't just my mother in that specific moment, but the collective, unspoken pressure from a system of beliefs that valued one type of life over all others. And I was tired of feeling betrayed by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I wasn't going to let their narrow definition of happiness dictate mine anymore. The foundation for the turning of tables was laid. I wouldn't just survive their judgment. I would stand in my truth that included Alex and the incredible future we were building, a future they couldn't even comprehend within their limited scope. The deepening crisis arrived not as a single collapse, but as an accumulation of relentless pressure on multiple fronts. Building the company felt like pushing a boulder uphill while blindfolded. Every victory was hard-won. Every setback felt catastrophic. Alex and I lived and breathed the startup, pouring every ounce of ourselves into it. Sleep was a luxury. Stress was a constant companion. There were moments, dark and quiet, where the doubt would creep in, cold and sharp. Was it worth it? Was any of it worth the constant struggle, the sacrifices, the fear of failure? And woven through the professional storm was the personal one. The family pressure didn't stop. It intensified as I got older, as the world around me seemed to settle into conventional paths. My mother's calls became less frequent, but the silence itself felt judgmental. When we did talk, the subtle digs were still there, sometimes overt. Still working those crazy hours? When are you going to settle down? Don't you want a family? It felt like the universe was conspiring to tell me I was wrong. My demanding career meant I missed some family events, fueling their narrative that I prioritized work over family, a false narrative, as I was building a future for my family, albeit a different kind. My relationship with Alex was serious, committed, but because we weren't married yet, it didn't count in their eyes. It was provisional, secondary to the real milestone. I remember one particularly brutal phone call with my mother a few months before the next Christmas. I was exhausted, emotionally fragile after a major deal fell through at work. I confided in her, seeking comfort, maybe just a listening ear. Instead, she pivoted, somehow turning my professional setback into another reason why I needed to find someone to lean on. "This is why you need a husband," she'd said, her voice laced with a pity that felt like poison. "Someone to come home to. Someone who understands." The implication was clear. Alex, my partner, my co-founder, the man who was holding my hand through the professional crisis, didn't count because we weren't married. Because he wasn't the one in the way she defined it. That call broke something in me. Not my spirit, not my resolve, but the last vestiges of my need for her specific validation. I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from a profound, weary anger. I felt utterly alone, judged, and misunderstood by the person who was supposed to be my strongest advocate. It was the lowest point. Everything felt like it was falling apart. The business was on shaky ground. The family rift felt wider than ever, and I questioned if I had the strength to keep fighting on either front. The weight of it all felt crushing. The crisis wasn't just external. It was a crisis of feeling truly seen and accepted for who I was. But sometimes hitting rock bottom gives you the solid ground you need to push back up. That phone call was the turning point. I sat there, the silence of my apartment deafening, and the tears stopped. A cold calm settled over me. I wasn't going to live like this anymore. I wasn't going to shrink myself to fit into their narrow world. I wasn't going to apologize for my ambition, my choices, my relationship, my life. Alex found me like that, sitting in the dark, eyes dry now, face hard. I told him about the call. He didn't offer platitudes. He just held me, and then he looked at me, his eyes reflecting my own steel. "We're doing this," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The company. Us. All of it. And I'm done letting them make me feel small." He nodded, understanding instantly. We had been building something extraordinary. Our company, born from countless late nights and a shared vision, was on the cusp of something big. The IPO wasn't just a business event. It was the culmination of years of relentless work, a testament to our belief in ourselves, in each other, in what we were building. The decision solidified. The next Christmas was coming up. The invitation arrived, formal and familiar. This time, I didn't dread it. I saw it as an opportunity, not for revenge, but for declaration. A chance to stand in my truth on my own terms, surrounded by the people who had, intentionally or not, tried to diminish me. We decided we would go. Together. And we wouldn't hide. We wouldn't deflect. We would simply share our news. The news that represented not just financial success, but the tangible outcome of the very life choices they had questioned. We walked into the familiar, festive chaos of my parents' house that Christmas Eve. The same smells of roasting turkey and pine needles, the same twinkling lights, the same faces. But this time, I felt different. Alex was beside me, his presence a quiet anchor. We weren't apologizing for being there, or for being together. We were simply there. The initial greetings were polite, wary. The air crackled with unspoken questions. People eyed Alex, assessing him. My mother offered a strained smile. "Oh, you brought company. Not your partner or Alex. Just company." The subtle dismissal was still there, the framing of Alex as temporary, incidental. Dinner was a tense performance of forced cheer. The conversation tiptoed around me, around Alex, focusing instead on Sarah and Mark, their recent home renovations, their plans for the future, safe, conventional topics. I answered questions about my job vaguely, keeping it high level, deflecting specifics. Alex was charming, polite, answering inquiries about his work with practiced ease, revealing nothing of the magnitude of what was unfolding. And then the moment came. Dessert was served. The clinking of spoons against porcelain felt unnaturally loud in the brief lulls in conversation. My mother, emboldened by wine and the comforting predictability of the ritual, turned to me, a familiar look in her eyes. The look that said, "Now. Time for the status update. The one where you admit you're still adrift." She opened her mouth. I saw the question forming, the comparison to Sarah hovering on her tongue. I braced myself, but this time, there was no fear, only a quiet certainty. Before she could utter a sound, Alex, who had been listening patiently all evening, leaned forward slightly. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that somehow commanded the room's attention. "Actually," he said, his voice clear and steady, cutting through the polite murmur, "we have some news." 30 pairs of eyes turned to him. My mother froze, her mouth slightly open, the question dying on her lips. "We're getting ready to take our company public," Alex announced, his gaze sweeping the table. "We filed the S-1 last week. The IPO is scheduled for early next quarter." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was absolute. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator. Forks clattered onto plates. My father, usually stoic, blinked rapidly. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with genuine shock and delight. And my mother, her smile vanished. Her face went pale, a ghostly white against the festive red of the tablecloth. Her eyes, fixed on Alex, then on me, were wide with disbelief. She looked utterly blindsided. The carefully constructed world where her daughter's success was measured solely by marital status had just been rocked to its core by an announcement that spoke a language of valuation, of market caps, of undeniable, quantifiable achievement on a scale she couldn't ignore. She didn't say, "At least your sister found a husband she couldn't." The words were choked off by the sheer, unexpected magnitude of the news. She just stared, her mouth slightly agape, looking for the first time in a long time, completely speechless. The air in the room shifted. The tension broke, replaced by a different kind of energy, surprise, curiosity, a ripple of excitement. Family members started murmuring, asking questions, their initial shock giving way to tentative congratulations. My father, recovering quickly, raised his glass. "Well, I'll be damned. That's remarkable." My mother still hadn't spoken. She'd just watched us, her eyes flicking between me and Alex. I met her gaze across the table. There was no triumph in my heart, no desire for her humiliation. Just a quiet, profound sense of standing in my truth, finally seen, finally acknowledged for the life I had built, the life I had fought for. It wasn't the way I would have chosen to gain her respect, but in that moment, it was undeniable. The girl who hadn't found a husband had helped build a multi-million-dollar company and was taking it public. The aftermath wasn't a dramatic, triumphant scene out of a movie. It was awkward, messy, and deeply human. My mother fumbled for words, eventually managing a strained, "Well, that's certainly news." Her initial shock slowly morphed into a sort of bewildered pride, layered with obvious attempts to recover her composure. She tried to ask questions, but they were stilted, revealing how little she understood the world I inhabited. "So, this means you'll be very wealthy." It reduced everything to a simple metric, unable or unwilling to grasp the years of passion, risk, and sheer grit that had gone into it. Other family members were genuinely excited, asking questions about the process, about what it meant. Sarah was thrilled, hugging me later, whispering, "I always knew you'd do amazing things." Her genuine happiness was a balm. Leaving that night felt different. The weight I had carried for so long felt lighter. The car ride home with Alex was quiet, filled with a comfortable understanding. We didn't gloat. We didn't need to. The moment had spoken for itself. The months that followed saw a subtle shift in the family dynamic. The questions about my marital status didn't vanish entirely, but they were less frequent, less pointed. There was a new respect, tinged with curiosity and perhaps a little envy. My mother, while never explicitly apologizing for her past comments, began to introduce me differently. "My daughter, who founded that tech company," she'd say, her voice betraying a touch of pride she had never shown before about my work. It was bittersweet. It hurt that it took a public validation of financial success for my life choices to be fully acknowledged. It highlighted how deeply ingrained certain societal and familial expectations were. But it also brought a strange kind of peace. I no longer felt the need to prove myself. I had done it, not for them, but for me. The IPO was a milestone in my professional life, but that Christmas announcement was a milestone in my personal one. The moment I stopped seeking external validation and simply claimed my space. The biggest lesson wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about realizing their approval wasn't the prize I needed. My worth wasn't measured by their yardstick. It was measured by the life I was building, the person I was becoming, the partner I had found, and the joy and purpose I found in my work. That Christmas dinner didn't just announce an IPO, it announced my own emotional liberation. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.